asking if they should go ahead and stop offering dual language programming. And so that really hurts my heart because dual language is not a program model that's a fad or something that you can just give up. It's something that's worth fighting for, and everything that we do in person, we can do remotely. We just need to think of it in different and unique ways. And so today that really is what it's going to be about. David Nungaray, who is trying to log on at this moment, is one of our friends from San Antonio ISD. He is the principal. Are you here, David?
I made it. See.
So David,
yeah.
I'm just introducing you. So you're good. You're in a moment you'll get a chance to share a little bit about yourself. I'm so glad that you made it. Thank you. Gracias. So David Nungaray is a principal in San Antonio ISD at Bonham Academy. And then my friend Marga Marshall, another awesome colleague, she is the dual language principal at Holbrook Academy in Mount Diablo Unified School District in California. And so we have a dual language principal from California and one from Texas to really help us out. I just wanted to remind you, we're gonna chat for about 45 minutes, and then we'll have about 15 minutes to answer some of the questions that I received via email. I want you to know that in the last couple of sessions, I've only had 3 or 4 slides. This time I actually created a presentation that's going to frame the questions that I'm gonna ask our 2 guests, because I know that this is important. There are a lot of school districts that are lost in terms of what they're supposed to be doing. But if you'll do a favor, and if you have any question, please write it in the chat box, and then I will be scrolling to try to see if we don't capture it with the questions that I've prepared, that we can ask it as well. The last thing that I want to say really quickly is, for those of you that don't know me, my name is José Medina, and I'm one of the co-authors of the Guiding Principles for Dual Language Education, which, as you know, is the resource that is most widely used to implement and also continuously improve dual language programs throughout the country and internationally. And prior to leading my own team, I served at the Center for Applied Linguistics, which is one of the major think tanks in the world in terms of serving language learners. And so that's a little bit about my background. I know that some folks were asking, so can we trust this guy? And I was like, pues, si quieren, if you want to trust me, ¿verdad? If you want to trust me, pues me hacen trust. So here we go. I wanted to start with this visual. COVID-19 guidelines do not change our dual language program structure or model, as well as it doesn't impact what we do in terms of biliteracy instructional practices. And I want you to feel free to take pictures of anything and post it on social media during our presentation and our interview, because remember that one of the pieces of advocacy is to ensure that we're getting out this information to other folks. And so please make sure to share whatever you want to share throughout the presentation. With this in mind, I'm going to ask my friend Marga to share just a little bit about yourself, Marga, where you are at, the school that you serve, the student population that you serve, just to kind of get us warmed up.
Marga. Hola a todos, aquí estoy.
Ándale, ¿qué huele?
Thank you. First of all, thank you so much, Dr. Medina, for this awesome opportunity. I'm really, really excited to be here. David, I finally see your face. I am the proud principal at Holbrook Language Academy, and it is a school in Concord, California, and we are part of the regional magnet from the Mount Diablo Unified School District. We reopened the school in 2017 as a language academy. We started with 175 students, and we're opening this year with over 400. So every year the program is expanding. We have a 2-way dual immersion. We do have English, Spanish, English speaking students, and then mostly English speaking students, and then we do have bilingual students and Spanish speaking students. So we kind of have a little of something. And I have the best team because all our teachers are amazing. We are diverse. We have teachers from all over the world and working really, really hard in making sure that we provide our students the best.
Nice, gracias Marga. Ah, ¿cómo te gusta? Yo sé lo que te gusta, yo sé que te gusta Marga, Marga, depende. Yo te voy a decir Marga, ¿verdad?
Me dices Marga, Marga, Marga.
Marga, se me salió la onda and I said Marga, dije, ¿y eso qué? Names are important, Marga. What about my friend David? David, would you tell us where you serve and the community that is lucky to call you principal?
Yeah, so buenas tardes a todos. Hi, everyone. My name is David Nungaray. Grew up in California. I saw lots of folks from California here. But my last decade, my work in education has been in San Antonio, Texas. So I'm currently the principal of Bonham Academy. It's been around 130 years, long time, and it's one of the longest standing dual language programs in our district. We've have, a university partnership with the University of Texas in San Antonio. So we've been doing dual language work at Bonham for a long time. I actually started off as a teacher at Bonham in 2010. I left and made my way back as principal. We serve almost 700 students. When I got there, we were at about 580. So we've grown pretty significantly. We are kindergarten through 8th grade. So we've also have secondary dual language in our program. And San Antonio ISD is definitely, especially under the leadership of La Doctora Olivia Hernandez, leading the way in a lot of the work that's being done in dual language in our city. We're now, out of our about almost 100 schools, 50 of them have a dual language program. And that went from 2 schools when she first got here, which was Bonham and another local neighborhood school, and it's just completely grown across the whole. Now already the highest grade level in our district is 11th grade. So our program for dual language for our kids will go all the way pre-K through 12th grade across our system. So at our school too, we have 3 sections of dual language and 1 section of monolingual. So we do manage both mainstream programs. But you've seen, especially in the work in our last 2 years, a lot more cohesion between those 2 programs because they used to be very separate. And a lot of folks that have had a lot of experience with dual language, we use a lot of the work from the Escamillas, and obviously a lot of the work that we do with José Medina as well. So thank you all for being here. And Marga, great to meet you. I know we always see each other on Twitter, but now we're here.
Gracias. Thank you. Thank you to the 2 of you. I do want to give props to some of the leadership in the 2 school districts that are represented, because Carmen Garcés in Mount Diablo is such a fierce guerrillere, ¿verdad? Because we're working on our pronouns in Spanish. And then Olivia Hernandez, la doctora, of course, in San Antonio, both dear friends who really, really do everything possible to ensure that our emergent bilingual students are served. I did want to remind you that as the 3 of us were preparing for this webinar, we are using the guiding principles as the foundation of everything that we're doing. If you still have not read or don't have access to the guiding principles, remember that this is the document, this is the resource that really does drive everything. And so you have the link there, www.cal.org/GP3. And it's a great resource because it has rubrics that support all of the research and support your growth. So if you've not read it yet, please make sure that you take a look, because that's what's going to ground all of our work. Additionally, before I ask the first real question in terms of the recommendations, I wanted to remind you, those of you that follow me on social media, you know that in April, I actually wrote an article for duallanguageschools.org. You have the link there available. Obviously, this is going to be recorded and posted on YouTube so that you're able to go back and reference it. But these 4 recommendations are the 4 recommendations that I gave in April. I've modified some pieces of it because it's important that we understand that everything that is happening right now with COVID-19 guidelines are fluid. But the first one is really be kind to yourself and those that you serve. Number 2, align all of your decisions with the program model and your language allocation plan. Like, that's imperative. If you're a 50-50 program, you're a 50-50 program. If you're a 90-10, you're a 90-10. If you're an 80-20, you're an 80-20. That doesn't change because of COVID-19. The 3rd recommendation, focus on biliteracy instructional best practices. Amplify the partner language, because the partner language is usually the one that's going to get screwed over. And then, of course, target cross-linguistic connections, because it is those cross-linguistic connections that are going to make the difference, especially in remote instruction. And then finally, keep things simple. Keep the lesson simplified and connected to the students' lives. And the questions that I've drafted are actually aligned with these 4 recommendations so that you are able to readily access them once this session is over. The other thing that I did, because I'm a type A personality nerd, and also I'm a former dual language principal and director, I knew that you all would want those recommendations to be grounded in the guiding principles. And so that's what I've done here. So recommendation number 1 is be kind to yourself and those you serve. The truth is that it's really about equity. So I could have used many rubrics, but I decided to focus on this one because being kind to yourself is going back to your roots. And your roots, even in remote instruction or hybrid version, are the 3 goals of dual language. The 3 goals of dual language are your friends, and that's how you're going to remain sane, ¿verdad? And so that's how I'm gonna lead to my first real question of the 2 participants. So Marga, would you get us started and just share a little bit about how were you kind to yourself, but also to those you serve, especially when COVID-19 happened in the spring? Like, what was that like, and what are some of the things that you quickly focused on in terms of really creating service for the kids and the teachers you serve?
It was March 13 when we were given the info from the district saying that, we're going to stay shelter in place. Immediately that Monday, 16, teachers started to work together and kind of seeing how we're going to do this. Without like that first week, central office was still working on giving teachers and principals some guidelines, but my teachers already starting to put together things. And the first thing that we all, did together is, what are our non-negotiables? What is it that when we are doing some live instruction with our students, what is it that we need to make sure that we keep in mind? Well, also connections. Like, we wanted to make sure that our kids were connected. Every week, I would have like a little info where teachers will be putting information out. I connected this student this week, or I haven't been able to connect this other student. So that was the first thing, making sure that families were okay, they were well, they were staying healthy. And I would even do some driving to some of the houses where the students or the families didn't connect because they were not able to check with the teachers or something. So that was the first thing, like making sure my teachers were all safe, making sure that our families were safe and connected, and kind of having all the same goal, our school program goals, while teaching our students.
Very nice. Yeah. And I'm sure that those lessons are definitely going to impact the work that you're doing now. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit later. So that's perfect. Mi amigo David, what about you? Because I know that things were also chaotic in your neck of the woods. And so what was that experience like? And how did you take care of the teachers you serve and the families and students you serve when this all began?
Yeah. So I think the first thing was definitely checking in with all of our families. I think everybody jumped on, that, because we knew what kids needed extra support. That started helping us align, especially whether it was just like basic Maslow's needs, right? What is it that they needed? Like, I couldn't even think, let me get you a laptop and get you, doing Seesaw and Google Classroom if you don't have food on the table. And I think like the fact that families were also just scared, right? Because so much was not known about the virus at that time, also caused us to be extra cautious, right? When we were doing tech distribution, when we were doing food distribution. Our district definitely did a lot of work in creating, like food hubs, in helping us get technology and hotspots to families. But I really just thought, if we can't take care of their basic needs, right? So many of our families depend on our schools to be a safe place for learning, but also just a safe place, period. And all of a sudden, our safety is turned upside down. and the connections that we value, ¿verdad? Las mamás que vienen en la mañana a dejar sus hijos, you know, so we also started working on our communication strategy. You know, Strand 6 is all about family and community. And to me, we had to elevate that even more so. Look at the things that we do that are already expected, right? That our families know these are the systems, these are the procedures. But in terms of learning, it really was about almost, I also think about just professional development, like the amount of crisis that our teachers found themselves in to learn really quickly. How do I do my Seesaw lessons? How do I put a Google Classroom together? And as I'm looking forward, you know, I'm thinking about the kindness that we have to give our teachers, and the way that we give them kindness is definitely by providing structures for support. And, you know, as we're thinking about, like we reflected back on the last 9 weeks, I feel really proud about the work that we did with families and that connection piece, the checking in, the taking care of basic needs. But academically, I think we would all reflect and say we weren't where we wanted to be. And so now is the time, again, we've been planning now for weeks in our district around how do we move in the right direction, especially when it comes to our 3 program goals. And I think you're right, those are our bread and butter. Like if we go back to those 3 things, that should tell us a lot. Like, yes, we're in COVID. Yes, we're doing digital learning, but no, the goals have not changed. And I think, you know, as I'm thinking about designing professional development for teachers, of course, there's the technology lift for families, for los abuelitos, las tías, los hermanos mayores que están ayudando. Like, I'm thinking about how do I equip them to help us, right? And really families to help each other. I see a lot of questions about, well, you know, can I break from my language? Can I, like,
we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. Yeah, we're going to
totally. But those are some of the things we did, I think, in terms of kindness to self. I mean, for principals, if I'm sure there are other principals on this call, drinking water, talking to a therapist, spending time in nature, finding time, like so many things with grief, right, really came into play. And I think, you know, we have to be kind to ourselves, because this is not an easy journey at all.
And it's going to continue, right, David? Because the truth is that there's so much uncertainty. I love that the 2 of you mentioned, of course, taking care of those that you serve first, but you also mentioned systems. And for those of us in the call, I know that we have teachers, but we also have directors, we have state officials. Systems are so very important. And you'll notice I've included some of those systems so that you could understand what it looks like, even in remote instruction. And that first system, again, is really the 3 goals of dual language. What's so interesting, and I know that both David and David and Marga know this, is that sometimes those of us that facilitate instruction don't even know the 3 goals of dual language ourselves. And sometimes we've never taught them to our students. And so then all of a sudden COVID-19 happens, and we're left with really no net to catch us. And so I wanted to share with you what the work actually looks like. This is what should have been happening prior to COVID-19. This is how we are kind to ourselves and to our students. We need to immediately allow and empower our students to know the 3 goals of dual language. The 2 examples on the edges are from Montgomery County Public Schools here in the Maryland, DC area. And that district has done some amazing work prior to COVID-19 and really getting the kids to own the 3 goals and be able to explain them. The first example is a 2nd grade. The one in the middle is actually from Albuquerque Public Schools. That's a 1st grade example. And then the 3rd one, I believe is I think 2nd or 3rd grades, I believe 2nd. So there we see that if this is something that is going to be the net for all of us, then the recommendation is really about ensuring that our kids early on in that 1st week, 2nd week of school, understand the 3 goals of dual language, because then everything can go back to that. And so that's really that recommendation for being kind to yourself. The second set of questions that I wanted to ask my 2 colleagues, because I know that this is what all of you are putting in the comments and in the comment section in the chat, is like, what does it look like? So I want you to know that every district is figuring things out. I did want to bring 2 rubrics from the guiding principles that are important. The first one is Strand 1, that's program structure, principle 4, key point 8. The program is adaptable and engages in ongoing self-reflection, evaluation to promote continual improvement. And I want you to take a look at exemplary, and I don't know if that's me that's marking, but they're an exemplary practice. You actually have the things that should be in place. That means that if COVID-19 happens, that means that if we have a change in superintendent or a change in principal, this is what we go to. The rubrics and the guiding principles are going to guide the way. The other rubric that I wanted to amplify today is the program is articulated across grades. And the reason is because in a moment, I'm actually going to share what is being done in Mount Diablo and what is being done in San Antonio ISD. And so at this moment, I'm gonna go ahead and share the space with my friend David. We're gonna talk about what kinds of things are being put in place in San Antonio ISD to ensure that dual language programming continues to offer robust biliteracy instruction. So David, what is San Antonio ISD doing so that some of the folks that perhaps are still trying to figure things out at the district level, at the school level, can see one example of what possibly could be done?
Absolutely. So our team at central office has really pivoted quickly to really prioritize what does synchronous learning time look like and what does asynchronous learning time look like, right? Because we're not in front of kids for the usual time that we're used to being in front of them. And so the big takeaway for us, right, when we look back at how did the last 9 weeks go and then how do the next, phases, however that looks like, right? Because we know it may be remote. In SAISD, we're going to be remote the first 3 weeks. It may be longer depending on the metrics in our city, but for sure, we've got to prepare for that strong start with digital learning. And so when we're in synchronous, live, real time with our families, we're for the most part in Spanish. That's, are the time where the parents are maybe, not doing so much of the lift because the teacher is, and they're doing the synchronous time. They're working with kids. And so 100% of the instruction pre-K through 5 is going to be delivered in Spanish when it's synchronous. So because we can't assume that the student is getting the academic language at home, we really want to prioritize what that digital dual language plan looks like. Their asynchronous time is where you're going to see some of the English language development time. So at pre-K through 2, for example, during their asynchronous time, a good bulk of their asynchronous time is still in Spanish. But there's also the consideration for English language development. And obviously in our traditional model, by 3rd grade, they're at 50-50. And so you see their asynchronous time, it does prioritize 50-50, but their synchronous time is in Spanish. And I think you have to put that stake in the ground. Vamos a estar en español cuando estemos en esta lección, porque es importante que los niños nos escuchen. Y sí, sé que es un poco difícil para las familias que no entienden el lenguaje en la casa, which is why we provide the supports and that cross-linguistic support. We're just going to keep going back to that. Because our parents, I'm doing roundtables with our families, and they're saying, it was really hard the last 9 weeks because I had to Google Translate the assignment for them. So, that, especially at the younger levels. So I think that's where this is our digital dual language model. But for the most part, this really reflects kind of our broader approach, which is to shift to a lot more synchronous time so that our students have access to a teacher that can help support them. And we know the complexities of a diverse community, right? Where parents are the ones that are essential workers or on the front lines of working, and they don't have, time until after 5 or 6 to come help their kid. And if they have 4 or 5 kids, this is the human side of things. But this at least helps let our teachers know. It sends a very clear message. 100% del tiempo cuando estemos con los estudiantes va a ser en español. And that's the stake in the ground.
Which I love because, the third recommendation, which we'll go into a little bit deeper right now, David, is to amplify the partner language. We need to remember that English carries so much privilege. And so we have to defend Spanish or Mandarin or Tagalog, whatever the partner language is. And so that's one of the things that I really loved about what San Antonio ISD is doing. The other piece that I want you to see is that they gave some information in terms of ELD. I know that we were getting some questions in the chat box about ELD. And then finally, some recommendations in terms of what that biliteracy instruction might look like. And don't worry, in a moment, we're also going to give you additional examples. This is not the only way to skin this cat, but I felt like it was important that our two guests share kind of what their district is doing. If you take a look at the two prior rubrics that I shared, this second one is about, there's an articulated plan across grade levels. Like as a school district, we should have a plan already for the fall semester that considers whether we're going to be remote, hybrid, or in person if that's the case. But this is really, really important. I also know that we have secondary folks in the space. One of the reasons that that David and Marga are such good guests is because both of them also serve middle school. And so I wanted to share, let me go ahead and mute everyone because I keep hearing something. And then when our guests speak, we can have them unmuted. So I wanted to share the San Antonio ISD secondary work as well. Just a reminder, I don't know what's happened, but in school districts around the country, people really have misidentified or misunderstood what's supposed to be happening at the secondary level. And this is prior to COVID-19. Remember that it's not 50% of the core instruction at the secondary level that is in English, and then 50% in Spanish, if that's the dual language program. It's 50% of the entire instructional day, just like in elementary. And so a lot of secondary schools, if I'm teaching 6th grade math, for some reason, some of us are teaching 1 week in English and 1 week in Spanish, or 1 unit in English, 1 unit in Spanish. That's not what we should be doing. Remember that the recommendation is that the entire semester would be facilitated in Spanish with cross-linguistic connections to English, because it's 50% of the entire instructional day, not 50% of math. If you then do the percentages, then you would have a percentage that's way off. So why am I sharing that? Because that's important when you make decisions in terms of what we're gonna do during COVID-19 guidelines this coming semester. I love that once again, San Antonio ISD has really amplified Spanish. David, do you wanna mention anything about the secondary?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is where I think in terms of secondary, it's really critical for collaboration and planning. Our teachers spending time really looking at how do they partner in their work, and like in particular, so we had AP Spanish, right? I don't know how many, even we take AP Spanish in 8th grade. We just got the results back, and like it really is a testament to the overall dual language program that our kids in 8th grade not only take the AP Spanish test in 8th grade, but they do extremely well, receiving 3s, 4s, and 5s. And I will tell you, it took a little bit of like just motivating our students, right? Because being in the digital learning ground is really exhausting for kids. It's exhausting for us as adults. And so even when this says 3 hours, right, that's a lot of time in front of a screen where you're not getting to interact. And I think our dual language secondary team did a great job in really harnessing like kids also like talking with each other, kids getting to talk. You know, so many of our kids in middle school just miss that social interaction. And so I think by prioritizing that Spanish time, todos estamos hablando en español, como si estuviéramos en la misma clase. And our Spanish teacher will be the first one to tell you it was not easy. We had to really motivate kids and call their parents and help them out. Our counselor, myself, our admin intern, like we were all on the phones with all the parents, porque los niños decían, oh, sí, ya hice la tarea, y no la hicieron, you know? And it's like, I love you, and I'm gonna make sure that we help you get that goal. We even had kids like right towards the end that said, I just don't wanna take the AP test, I don't feel ready. And those are the kids that got the 4s and 5s because they just needed that extra motivation. And you're right, English does begin to get privileged. It's gonna happen, so we have to then control what we can control, which is when we're in front of kids, estamos en español.
Absolutely, and I'm seeing a lot of questions about what does that look like? So know that we're gonna get there, and we have some examples, but we wanted to make sure that we tackled the systems level first. I do wanna give my friend Marga a chance to also share what Mount Diablo ISD has decided up to now. Their team is still working on finalizing, but they've done something that is aligned with the research that's really interesting. I've been doing technical support all summer long with school districts, and sometimes 2 and 3 hours at a time, just looking at their master schedules, their ELD, as well as their dual language plan. It's very intensive work. So I know that it takes a long time, but I'm excited at some of the choices that were made with Mount Diablo, and I'll share with you in a moment why. Go ahead, Ms. Marga. Would you tell us a little bit about what Mount Diablo has decided?
Mm-hmm. So in our reopening plan that was shared with the community, the dual language instruction programs will be maintained via the online platform with alternating days of instruction in English and Spanish. So as you have actually showing in here, we used to do 2 languages. We were 50-50. We used to do 50% of the day in one language and then switching after lunch. So with this, starting this school year in distance learning, this is what we have from the EL and dual language departments, having the one day of instruction in English and the other one in Spanish. We're also following the California guidelines into making sure that our students have direct daily live instruction, and that's something that it's not in here yet because our district is still working in that piece in working with our teachers and how is that going to look like. So if we're looking at the TK in kindergarten, out of those 180 minutes of daily biliteracy instruction, we're still looking, the live instruction is going to be determined. So the kids are not going to be 180 minutes in front of the computer. They'll have some live instruction with their teachers, and then there will be some time where they can use some of the programs like Imagine Learning, kind of to help with their language and boost some of the things, or if the teachers have given them an assignment to kind of complete the assignments by themselves. So
yeah. And Marga, I'm so glad that you mentioned that the work is still ongoing because there's so many things that are shifting with state agencies as we speak. I mean, being from Texas, I serve a lot in Texas as well as in California, but I mean, it's changing daily. One thing that I wanted to mention, because this is one of the questions that has come up, Jose, what do we do if it's going to be difficult to do an AM PM flip? Does that mean that by switching to an A day, B day, does that mean that we're doing something wrong because we're switching our program structure? And the answer is absolutely not, because your program structure is still 50-50. But if you as a district leadership team, if you as a campus leadership team realize that the way in which the district guidelines kind of create the minutes, that it's not going to make sense if you have 2 hours combined in live remote or kids doing things on their own, that you're going to have an AM PM flip, then A day B day during a crisis remote instruction, if that makes sense, it still aligns with the recommendations because they're getting access to each of the 2 program languages no later than every other day. And if they're focusing on cross-linguistic work, then obviously that is also what we need to be doing. Thank you. Yeah, go ahead, Marga.
Something that is going to be changing from spring to this school year is back in spring, the teachers would do a Zoom with the whole classroom. So it was kind of sometimes crazy, right, to monitor and to be everything. But the proposed schedule that our central office is working on is having at least 2 live sessions. So with the classroom, just having the classroom, half of the classroom in one session, half of the classroom in the other session. That way, instead of having 29 to 30 students, you just have 14, 15 students, where the work is a lot more independent and you can connect a lot more with the students.
I like that. Thank you, Marga. Yeah, very interesting what you all have decided to do. Still aligned with the research, and it doesn't impact your program structure. Still a 50-50, but we're making some modifications because the situation calls for it. I have a really amazing colleague. Her name is Tamara from Montgomery County Public Schools. I don't know if you're with us, Tamara, but I had spoken to you earlier, and if you would be able to take a minute or so to just share what you all are doing in your school district. I would love for the group to hear that as well if you did log on. Let me see if she's here. Tamara, if you're not here, no worries. I know that there's a lot of decision-making happening, so there we go. Perfecto, so we're going on to recommendation number 3. So recommendation number 3 is focusing on biliteracy instructional practices, elevating Spanish, and focusing on that cross-linguistic work. And here you have strand 3, which is instruction in the guiding principles, key point E. Instruction leverages students' bilingualism by strategically incorporating cross-linguistic connections. And if you take a look at full and exemplary, those are the things that we are going to do regardless of what the situation is in terms of live remote or the way that we lesson plan things that students are going to be doing on their own. And so I wanted to share a couple of the things that definitely are going to make a difference. Systems have been talked about by both David and Marga. If you have systems in place, both of them have mentioned non-negotiables. You need to list those non-negotiables either as a campus or as a district. If your district is not doing that, remember that we can now share this presentation so that they can get on it. But if you need to do this for yourself in your grade level, then here you have something that Marga was talking about. I've been privileged to serve in Mount Diablo for several years now, and we've worked on some systems that were in place prior to COVID-19 that really have changed the game during remote instruction. So Marga, we'll start with you and then we'll move over to David. Like, what are some of these non-negotiables that you were talking about?
Mm-hmm. Something that our school has been working since the beginning, and something that it's a direction from our EL dual language department led by Carmen Garces, is the color coding information, where we have partner teachers or we have self-contained teachers. So when we are in one language, we're focusing on the Spanish, the color coding is the green, and if we are focusing in the English, then we have the blue. So color coding has been also used through distance learning, because it's super easy if you are sharing your screen with your students and you're going with one or the other language. Then the 4+1 language domains, there you go, a non-negotiable. Our students have it, our teachers refer to those when they are giving live instruction or when they are doing a pre-recorded lesson and then teaching to students. And that's something
Can I jump in real quickly on that one, Carmen? Yeah. I mean, Carmen, Marga, if you have not taught the 4+1, you need to do this like right away when school starts, because this changes the way that kids move through the space of virtual learning. And this is your entry into the language learning target. This is your language objective. And what you teach kids is that the way that they learn any piece of content in either program language is by practicing that content, by engaging with that content via listening, speaking, reading, writing, and meta-linguistic awareness, which is the +1. And so I want you to know that if I go to a school in Mount Diablo and I ask a student whether they're in kinder or second grade, whatever grade they're in, they're going to know that the way they work with content is through the 4+1. And they actually can explain what meta-linguistic awareness is, which is kind of crazy because there are some of us that are dual language teachers that can't explain it succinctly, but yet a 5-year-old can, because they've been empowered to do so, ¿verdad? So if you need help on this, go to my Instagram account, go to IGHTV, and you can actually have a 3-minute review on how to teach the 4+1 to your students.
Mm-hmm. Yay!
Yes. ¿Qué más, Marga? Síguele.
And the 4+1, something that I also wanted to mention, is not only the teachers, they've been working with the students. This is not something new. Before going into shelter in place last year, I had a dual language workshop with parents. So parents are also aware of that. So when the teacher is doing the live instruction, referring to that, and maybe you might have a parent around or helping, they also know about this. So that's, something that that it's It's in our blood. We all need to know. If you put a step in Holbrook, I'm gonna say, hey, welcome. What are the 4+1 language domains? And I ask them. So it's very important.
And I put there a secondary example just so that my secondary folks could see what it might look like for your middle school and high school kids. And then you also talked about anchor charts and bridging. And so I wanted to make sure that you were able to talk about this.
And this is actually one of my first grade English partner teachers. She's already working in her virtual classroom, Adriana Flores. That's her little Bitmoji right there. And she's already working on the 3 bridge, the charts that we use, right? Where they're doing an ELA lesson, and the teacher is working on, this is, the words in this case are more like cognates or words, right? So we see it's a level 1, super easy. We have the bridge in the middle, that's the red, and then the Spanish, as I mentioned before, is color coded. So it's everything embedded in here. And then on the top you have the 4+1. So while the teacher is introducing some new vocabulary, some new grammar rules, anything new, and the students are making connections, or she is saying, well, now I'm speaking, yo estoy hablando, right? So now you're listening. So everything is embedded in just looking at this visual, you have it. So it's something that my teachers, when we were sent home, my teachers took them and they put them in the, in the living room, and they were all placed in there. And it's amazing how, if you've done it already in the classroom, you're going to do it again through virtual classroom. So
yeah, and if you haven't done it in the classroom, don't freak out. It's something that you could teach easily and start using the icons in your virtual settings, whether at the elementary, middle school, or high school, to serve your students. A bunch of you have questions in terms of how do we get kids to interact authentically. Well, guess what? The reason they didn't interact authentically prior to COVID-19 is because we didn't have systems to have them authentically interact. That's the 4+1. And so how do you expect the kids to authentically interact in remote instruction if we didn't even have authentic interaction prior to remote instruction? And so this is such an important step. I wanted to pass the mic over to David. David, what are some of the things that have been non-negotiables? You mentioned non-negotiables in San Antonio ISD. What is it that you've been able to provide in terms of support for the teachers? And I know that we're going a little bit into the question period, but I think like the information is important. And so we're going to finish it. And then if you'd like to stay for questions, I'm sure that David and Marga would be more than glad to answer some questions. So here we go, David. What about what's happening in San Antonio ISD and specifically at Bonham?
Yeah. So I put it in the chat, but if you, one of the things that I'm telling you, our dual language team at the district office, they are not shy about saying that the language at risk is Spanish, and that the language we must prioritize is Spanish. And especially difficult, and I don't know everybody in the audience, but when you have gentrification of dual language programs, it's very, very easy to start tuning over to the groups that say, I need more, right? Y en la casa están los niños que necesitan que su lenguaje, su cultura también se eleve al nivel. We're there, so that for us is definitely a non-negotiable. And I think that's even, like, I'm reflecting, Marga, hearing you and thinking, okay, leading my professional development, when we're having faculty meetings, how am I modeling these things in the environment? And I can tell you that's a growth area for me right now, because I've been prioritizing safety and operating procedures and logistics. Also that reality, ¿verdad? Tampoco no podemos ignorar that some of us are just like, how is this all gonna look? Because what if I have some kids at school and some kids at home? But this is why I love getting to connect with dual language educators across the country, porque te llena otra vez de más inspiración, and it puts a little fire under your butt to say, this is what we have to do. This is it. And I think, I really, really think the collaboration between our schools, I see my friend Jenny Rosas from Twain Dual Language Academy is also here. Like, we have to have our, like, what a cool thing that our teachers could be across schools, and we don't have to say like, well, go take a day for a sub, right? Like we have the platforms digital to do these kinds of things. So definitely privileging Spanish. I've been having family roundtables, Y yo los hago en los dos lenguajes y todas las familias están invitadas y si estoy hablando en español, help them. But we've also talked about potting families. You've probably heard about the potting phenomenon and where families are creating their, and I'm like, no. We're in pods because we do that in school. In school, we have bilingual buddies. So guess what? Now it's going to be your bilingual buddy families. Y vamos a estar in pods. And so like, you've got to take that access to privilege and bring it to all, not just, and that's, we're having conversations with families. I'm like, I know it's difficult that you don't know the Spanish. I get it. I know it's frustrating. But this is, for our Spanish-speaking communities, esa es la frustración de estar también en los Estados Unidos, donde su lenguaje no siempre se honra de la manera que debería ser. So I will tell you, some of my Spanish-speaking parents have said, I also do some sessions 100% in Spanish, because we also have, right? COVID nos está dando muchas preguntas. And, you know, ¿cómo se va a mirar el aprendizaje? Y no sé la tecnología, y yo tengo que trabajar, y el abuelito es el que le ayuda. So all of these things are really real, but we're looking at bilingual buddies or pods as structures that we would authentically have in the classroom and that we can create. And that just brought parents' anxiety and stress down. They're like, oh, I can connect with other people. And there's so many of us that are bilingual, like so many of our parents choose these programs because they themselves didn't have the language growing up, right? And so I think the potting thing is something that we're bridging.
I love that. I had not heard of the potting, David. I am really, really excited about that. And of course, I'm stealing it. I'll give credit to San Antonio ISD and you. But that is such an amazing, amazing idea. I'm like academically crushing on San Antonio ISD right now more than I usually am.
Yeah. Somebody asked, like, what is potting? If you look it up, you'll see it's something that was evolving very rapidly in more higher socioeconomic communities, where they said, well, our 4 families are going to co-quarantine and we're going to hire a special tutor. And that's kind of some of the pieces. And we're like, no. We can do this as a, and, you know, again, when you have of dual language programs, you have to be very, very and intentional. There's a lot of wealth that comes from all families. There's a lot of, and I think that's one of the things that I was going to talk about next is social cultural competence has to be a non-negotiable. We things around the Black Lives Matter movement, where, you know, we put things out for pride. Like we are, you know, we have to be modeling for our families what it means to live in a diverse and rich community, which is what we have at our school. And I think the social competence piece has to be a non-negotiable. And then the last thing, which was the 4+1, I'll definitely echo that we have to think outside of the box. Like, what are the apps? What are the tools that allow us to have authentic, because it cannot be listening. It cannot be listening. When we say 2 hours of synchronous time, no nomás es la maestra hablando por 2 horas. It's the same practices. If you didn't practices set straight when you were in the classroom, it's going to be very difficult to translate them to the digital environment. And I will own that we have a lot of work to do in the too. So like I said, I'm going to, like, this is because it reminds you, oh yeah, my brain has been on operation, on logistics, it's been on safety and hand sanitizer, masks. That's the reality that principals are living in right now, that central office is living in right now, that are living in right now. But so are our families. Y las familias quieren regresar y quieren tener una mejor experiencia. As the emergency remote teaching, let's just call it what it was, emergency remote teaching. And the opportunity and the ability to start the year differently. That doesn't mean we're going to start perfectly. And I tell our families that, and our teachers, you know, also, like we talked about being kind to ourselves, we have to ask the same of our teachers, that they're kind to themselves and that they keep connecting with the things that we know are tried and true in dual language programs.
Yeah, I mean, so many things that you just said resonated. Obviously, you know how I am in terms of equity and social justice. If you've not seen the video that we did a live webinar on anti-Blackness, anti-Blackness sentiment, and how can we use anti-bias, anti-racism tools in the dual language classroom. The video's on YouTube already, and really focuses on how that cannot be left to the side. As David mentioned, like that needs to be at the core of everything that we continue to do, even in crisis learning. The other piece that you mentioned, David, that I want to make sure that people heard is the gentrification of dual language programming is definitely happening and amplified during COVID-19 guidelines, because a lot of the decisions that school districts and campuses are making are through a lens of privilege. And remember that at the core, dual language is about creating desmadre in the name of equidad and social justice for Black, Indigenous students of color who have been linguistically and culturally minoritized and marginalized in systematic fashion in the United States. And so our first goal in dual language is to ensure that our decision-making is grounded in that fact first. Dual language is not about creating more privilege to students that already bring it into the space. And we need to be willing to say that out loud to our white families, to our high socioeconomic families, to the linguistically privileged families. And so if you are not saying those things as a teacher, as an assistant principal, principal, district leader, or state leader, then get it together, comadre, compadre, because it needs to be said first and foremost. Así es que, mira, you got me all riled up, David.
And you know who riles the person that in our district, in addition to Doctora Hernandez, if you're not following Pedro Martinez, our superintendent, that guy, and he walks the walk. And then our chief academic officer, Patty Salzman, also on Twitter. I mean, they are in a community as diverse as we are in San Antonio, and I'm talking diversity socioeconomically, that has experienced severe like redlining and racial segregation in our city. Like COVID has only brought those more to light, right? Like these issues more to light, the food insecurity, the digital divide. If you're I'm from California, but I say I'm from San Antonio because you have to watch the ways that equity have to drive our work. And that's, you know, when you work for a leader like Pedro Martinez, when you work for a leader like Patty Salzman, then that kind of gives us fuel. But I think the leadership also comes from our teachers. Our teachers can also a lot about how they're doing it. One of the things the dual language is the teacher being part of the bridge. Who's interacting the most with the parent? It's our teachers. So we really have to privilege and really champion our teachers so that they can do the work with the families.
Absolutely. Gracias, gracias. So recommendation number 4 takes us to our last set of questions. So keep the lessons simplified and connected to the students' lives. It's that sociocultural competence piece that David was talking about. Remember that there are 4 ways to write a culture learning target. And even if you're not sharing culture learning targets with kids during remote instruction, you can use the 4 ways so that as you're lesson planning, you're identifying critically being self-reflective. Does my lesson, does the lesson that our grade level team planned, does it fall within one of the 4 ways that we create and focus on sociocultural competence during lesson planning? And there's a video for that too, that's 3 minutes. Así es que, ándale. So principle 4, key point A, I picked this particular rubric. Do y'all like how I've given you the rubrics, gente, so that you can go cause desmadre in your districts with rubrics in hand. This rubric is focused on instructional staff uses technology tools to engage all learners. I could have chosen many rubrics, but I wanted to focus on this one because guess what? Everything that we're doing in remote fashion is actually a part of the guiding principles for dual language education as well. And so I wanted to ask some questions, ask the last question really of my friends. Carmen, I keep calling Marga Carmen. Carmen, no, ya te tengo en mi mente because you and I were talking about Nico. So Marga and David, if you would tackle, are there any other strategies that you might be willing to talk about or any final thoughts? And then I'm gonna talk about Ms. Hunt's classroom here, bringing it all together for us. And Marga, let's start with you, Marga. Any final thoughts, suggestions, tools?
Yeah, resources or things that we can keep doing is when we're planning, making sure that, you know, the alignment in the lessons is with the school program or the school. Something that we're also doing or we were doing is that cultural objective and using it. Our school is a language and culture school. So working on diversity and bringing those communities and bringing different cultures into our into the lessons, right? That's something that needs to be. Also, as David mentioned, right, that the teachers are the ones who are communicating with families. But as the principals, we can also have, like I had my cafecito con la directora, and I used to have my cafe, continue having our ELAC meetings with the emerging bilingual families, because they are the ones who actually were like, I need classes on how to help my kids. I don't know how to open the Google Classroom. I don't know how to. So really, really making sure that we have all the feedback from the families, and then helping them, making sure and ensuring that if we're asking them to do something online, we're making sure that they have the tools necessary and everything to ensure that all the students have access to the curriculum that we are asking them to do. Mm-hmm.
Very nice. Gracias, Marga. What about you, David? Some final thoughts? And then I have a couple of questions for the two of you.
Yeah. So one that I can point people to is learning. Well, we've heard both from students and teachers and families, and this environment can be very challenging. So you make it exciting and engaging and authentic. We programming called Phenomenal, like we did a Semana Phenomenal, we did a Phenomenal finale. That was already a part of our school culture, and we brought it to the digital world. And it allowed us to use social media. Dr. José Medina was a guest that read some of his poetry. This is a time for us to, I think outside of the box. Tenemos que pensar más allá de la and frontiers. And by doing some phenomenal programming, we brought in like people to come to a science lesson kids on our social media in Spanish. And we brought in like some, Dr. José Medina. We brought in 1, 2, 3 Andres to come perform and like really be interactive. Like, so it's a time, I think, for us to think outside of the box. We also partnered with several schools, including our friends from Dual Language Academy. And we did like some art lessons with a story from, with Luchador, did some art. And so I think like those kinds of activities have a very clear learning objective to them. And they also bring into account a lot of the dual language components in really different ways. And it also just community building piece. And I think comunidad es lo más importante. I mean, this is why we have like 600 educators coming together from all across the country. Community and you have to be the driving forces for us to work through this pandemic. I just doing this alone, right? Like there's no, I'm only as good as like the team of people that I have with me. But I dual language team is not just across the US, but we know it's across the world. And so keep following Dr. José Medina, what the messages that he puts out there. They're always fire every week. And I think, keep learning. That's been a big for me, and keep coming to things like this that remind you of the keys that we already know and have in us. But COVID threw us a little bit upside down, right? Like we are still, like we're still coming out of it, and we're going to be a while. So let's have some fun while we do it.
Thank you, David. Let me give you the question so that you can ponder. And as you're pondering, I'll ask my friend and colleague, Jerusha Hunt, if she might take 30 seconds, 45 seconds to tell us about this image that I wanted to close off with. We're going to stay for about 10 minutes to answer some questions. I know that some of you just plan to be with us till 5, so our feelings will not be hurt if you log off, but I want to make sure that we answer some of the questions because they were good. So this one question, if you could ponder as my friend Jerusha clicks her mic. So what recommendations, David and Marga, do you have for building a safe community of learners in a virtual space? I thought that was such an important question because many of us have never pondered that. So how do we keep our kids and our teachers safe in this virtual setting? And Jerusha, are you there? I don't even know if you logged on. I'm hoping that you logged on.
Aquí estoy.
Jerusha, would you take about 45 seconds and tell us about this? Because you sent this to me, and this was a presentation that you did to facilitate professional development for teachers, but you like stole my heart because everything is included here. Would you share with us?
So I provided a training to our teachers in EPISD during our Dual Language Teacher Institute about your testimonial work and what it looked like in my classroom last year, because it made such a huge difference in how I connected with my kids. My kids, especially after the August 3rd tragedy in our community, really needed a new way for me to connect and to trust me. So I really thought that that was something of value that our teachers needed to roll out this year as well, especially after COVID and now on the first anniversary. So what you're looking at is kind of it's my Bitmoji classroom is the template of me. And it kind of really looks like my classroom. There's always a Ricky Martin hiding. But then I wanted to make sure that the 3 pillars were there, that I had my cinco dominios, mis 4 dominios de lenguaje. And then these are just samples that the attendees that I was serving were able to click on and see the examples of the different testimonial work. My sample that I did is the guide on the side when we were working through the testimonial steps, a sample from our friend Francois on the Twitterverse, and then one of the samples from one of my students. And so all of these were clickable items, but it was really important to me for them to see, like, this is kind of what my classroom looks like if they were in the room with me. Maybe I wouldn't be wearing my pantuflas with bunnies, but maybe I will now. But the idea of even the posters underneath, I wanted to be real cognizant of the items that I placed, and my Black Lives Matter and my welcoming space for everyone and the power of el cerebro bilingüe. So all of these were clickable up here. All of these click to actually your videos, Dr. Medina, about the 4 dominios, about the 3 pillars. So it was all clickable. So that was just a little training. But then I plan to use the template with my students this fall.
So Jerusha Hunt is a middle school educator in El Paso ISD, and as some of you know, that's the school district that kicked me out when I was a kindergartner, out of school not once but twice. And so I get to now serve as a dual language expert, and so it makes me so happy that this is something that we could do with kids. And so you could show them a video of me explaining the 3 goals of dual language, or you doing it because they click the 3 goals and you have it in English or Spanish. The 4+1, you'll notice that their 4+1 looks different than the one from Mount Diablo Unified, because every school district chooses what they want, but the kids still own it, which is what's important. And then my friend David was talking about the sociocultural competence. I mean, you have a Black Lives Matter poster, even in your remote instruction, visible, so that the kids continue to understand that their job isn't just to be bilingual and biliterate, because what good is it if they're bilingual and biliterate if they're sucky people with a black heart? Like, our job in dual language is to create kids that are able to connect with others and that are less of a mess than we are. So Jerusha, just so much awesomeness, and all of the strategies that we've talked about, and it aligns with the 4 recommendations that I thought, like, teachers are going to be like taking pictures of this. Your Twitter handle is it tu güera favorita?
Yes, that's me.
Twitter is
in the chat.
Yes, Twitter is at tu güera favorita. So question, how do we keep our kids safe, Marga and David? And then I have one other question for you, and then we'll close it out. So that our folks can get to their families and enjoy their Friday and their weekend.
In our reopening plan, they were mention of social emotional lessons for students. So that's something that we really want to take into consideration. We have counselors at the schools, and they can be supporting also our students. And also asking our families, what do you need? How can I help you? How can I serve you? If you don't have a computer, if you don't have a Chromebook, let me know. I'll bring it to you. You don't have Wi-Fi, let me go ahead and get it for you. You forgot a textbook, you forgot whatever. It's really making everything accessible to them. Mm-hmm.
Muchas gracias. Y Marga, tú tienes un corazón que se siente por la computadora, and so I'm sure that your families, the families that you serve, and the kids that you serve are super excited.
There are families in here, somewhere in some behind those pictures. So I'm so excited.
Yo lo sé. Y David, what about you? How do we keep our kids safe in this new reality?
Yeah, so the first word that came to mind is choice. I think that part of why that's so important is because kids have to also feel comfortable in this new environment, figuring out who they are, right? Just like we're figuring out who we are in the digital world. It's important to create space for them to do that too. And why I say choice is, I had a roundtable yesterday with, y la familia me dijo, es que mi niña no quiere estar en su cara. Quiere ver, pero no quiere que todos la miren. And I think that has to do with some of our kids' home conditions. And we can't ignore that not everybody has the same four walls or living environments. And so I think small things like that, where you create the safety for families to communicate their needs to you, you know, for that mom to share that with me, nunca se me va a ir del corazón, because I really think that my house looks different. And hopefully one day we can get our student to know that her house is as beautiful as everybody else's house. But right now that's her reality, and I want her to feel like, well, no voy a ir al Zoom porque no quiero que miren a mi casa. How real is that? You have to listen to our people, and you have to listen to our kids. The other thing is, I think in our faculty meetings, we have to model a lot of it, and like really model safety for our families. So we do a lot of breakout rooms, and I tell them, I'm not gonna hop in there. Like, here are the discussion questions, and I'm not gonna hop in there. Or sometimes I say, you know what, hey, I wanted to hop in there, but I wanna be clear, like when I'm hopping in, when I'm not hopping out. And it's little choices like that that we make that help create a safer environment for everybody. Because these conversations are easy, and sometimes I'm asking for feedback that's not easy to hear. So I need to create a space, even with our faculty, as we're learning this and designing it, for them to give me some feedback sometimes too, and that they feel safe doing. So modeling it, and I think definitely lots of.
Yeah, David, you made me start chillando, because it just I know that the participants are thinking like, what amazing biliteracy instructional coaches, because that's what the two of you are. That's what our principals, assistant principals should be. That's what all of us are searching for. That's why I keep telling dual language teachers, like, stop waiting for David, stop waiting for Marga. Go get your admin certification, because it's your freaking duty to go into the spaces where you're not presently represented and disrupt the hell out of those spaces. Like Marga, David and I are waiting for you. Andale, that's what we need to do. And the last question, because everyone needs to go get dinner on the East Coast, which I think is important for our early childhood teachers. I actually got this question asked more than any other. How do we ensure that our pre-K, in California, our TK students, our kinder students, how do we ensure that they have an amazing learning experience, especially under these conditions? And I think that's such an important question. I know I didn't have an amazing kinder experience, but most kids do. And so how do we make sure that our TK, pre-K, kinder students love school from the first moment, even if it is through a computer? And whoever wants to start, David or Marga.
I'll go first, because I have to hop off. I have to go to another.
You go see.
I will, yes. So we've been thinking about this the most. And really, if you have not done a roundtable families, I would highly encourage that. We did ours with K-12 families, and we broke them up into breakout rooms with each other, and we had guiding questions, and that kept coming up. That's their experience. So we're even looking at, like, we did a lot of car parades, you know, they were all over social media. And so our families are like, well, that first day of school is so special. So we're looking at like doing a car parade. Like, there's little things we can do to kind of give them a semblance of normalcy, even though we know these times are normal. But I definitely think a lot of young kids, one mom said to me, quiero que mis niños conozcan a los otros niños para cuando vayan a escuela tengan amigos. Friendships, y'all. Like, kindergartners, it's so critical for them to develop friendships. So we just have to listen. I think when we look our ear to the ground, and when we hear our families, it makes for a much more rich experience, because they also know. They know their kids, they know the environments, they know their fears, they know they just know their kids. And especially in kindergarten, I can't pretend to know exactly what it's going to look like. But hearing them in these roundtables has been incredibly powerful.
I
So
love
thank
that, David.
you.
Yeah,
Gracias.
and thank you for joining us, David. And I know you need to jump onto another meeting, so gracias.
A usted. Great.
Marga, what about you, comadre? What do we do to help our TK?
I know, our littles, right? Our tiny ones.
Yes.
We do need to work, and I did have some conversations with some of my TK second grade teachers. We need to work to develop a connection and make sure that we make live instruction low stress that all can access, especially in the beginning, right? Like, because we did have some parents saying, just like David was saying, you know, I'm nervous, I don't want to, everything. Especially for TK and kindergarten, when immersed in a live lesson with the teacher. In our case, if you're English speaking students and we have the Spanish teacher doing the lesson, making sure that we're scaffolding the new language, right? And provide all this early opportunity for them. And, you know, like doing some video, introducing slowly some of the different areas, and things like I had teachers doing lunch bunch. Isn't that awesome? So that's the connection that you get with your teacher, like, you know, 4 or 5 kids at a time, signing up for lunch bunch to have that time with your teacher. So it's just awesome.
I love it. Thank you, Marga. So some of you are asking, how do we get a copy of the chat? I didn't know this, but I read someone put that if you click on the 3 little buttons, the 3 little dots, you can keep a copy of the chat box so that if the resources that are in there, you can save that to your desktop. I didn't know that, Marga. Mira, mira. Yo no sabía. So make sure that if you want the content of the chat box that you click on those 3 dots. I have some social media reflection exit ticket that you can do on your own. But remember that part of our job really is to amplify best practices. So make sure that you post something on social media. After this live webinar, I'm ready to. And you can find Marga at Marga Marshall on Twitter. And you can find me on Twitter at José Medina JR89, José Medina Junior 89. Hopefully you can reference this video again so that you can see the 4 recommendations. I hope that it was helpful, Marga. Don't you hope that this was helpful?
Me encantó, me encantó, me encantó. Yes.
Gracias. Un abrazo. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out with us. Un abrazote. Remember that you're the best in the world. You can do this. Ándale. A causar desmadre. Black Lives Matter. Ándale. Happy Friday, everybody.
Thank you.
Gracias a todos.
Gracias.
I will post the video later so that you can share it far and wide.
A ver esa foto.
Una foto.
Claro, ahí va esa sonrisa.
Espérate. Bye, everybody. Have a good weekend. Thank you, thank you. I'm scrolling through my boxes to say adios, adios.
Thank you so much. This was awesome.
I am so glad that it was helpful. Un abrazote, everybody. District leaders, no manchen, ándenles. Help the teachers out.
Gracias desde California.
Gracias desde Mount Diablo.
Round Rock, Texas. Gracias.
Gracias
De
desde
nada.
Illinois.
Thank you, everybody. Adios, adios.
Adiós, hermoso.
Gracias.
Gracias.
Desmadre,
De San
desmadre.
Diego.
A sus órdenes. You know I'm here to serve. Un abrazote. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.